The information provided is not a substitute for legal and other professional advice where the facts and circumstances warrant. People should always consult their own legal or other professional advisors and discuss the facts and circumstances that apply to their specific circumstances. The information shared on Ask the Landlord is for educational purposes only.
My question today is, all right, Albert, what are some landlord pet peeves?
Oh my. Hi, Melissa.
Hello.
Landlord pet peeves.
What gets under your skin as a landlord?
You know, a lot of the properties we manage have central heating systems. And what I really am after as a landlord is making sure my residents are comfortable and happy in their homes. And around heating season, especially in New York with older buildings, it's hard because you have certain people that are some people are colder than others, let's say, right? But and a lot of people as residents, like it might be 72 degrees in your apartment and you might be cold because you're, I don't know, you may not wear warm clothes,
Right.
Because
I'm from Miami.
So the question is, right, you might be from Miami and you're like, oh, I'm so cold. This is too cold.
Mm-hmm.
Or you might be from Alaska and you're like, I'm used to the cold and and it's too hot,
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, that's a freak. So imagine, let's say you have a multi-unit building and as a landlord, you're like, the heat's on, the boiler's on. And you're providing the heat you're supposed to provide, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute. And then you go, oh, but there are some people that are cold. I'm like, yeah, but I want them to be warm. But certain people, like, people are older and they're colder,
Right.
or they're younger. And like, even in my own apartment, I like to sleep where it's colder. My wife likes it to be warmer.
Mm-hmm.
How do we handle that? So that's like, we have like these, how you have these commercials where you see the mattresses that make you cooler and stuff like that. So those are things that everyone has their personal preferences, and it's hard to manage that from a landlord's perspective, right? But then there are rules that everyone should know about the time. So every municipality has some rules about when the heating season is, depending on the time of year and what the temperature needs to be in an apartment. And if it's not, you should call your landlord, and you need to get these things taken care of, right? So as a landlord, I really, like I say, I work to do this, but a lot of people aren't aware of this. So I'm going to tell you the rules, and I just Googled it. So
yeah, what are the rules? What does the temperature have to be?
This is the heating rules in New York City.
I'm going to guess. Let me guess.
Go. Totally.
My guess for heating season in New York, what this means when the landlord has to turn on his heating system and it provides heat to the units.
And we're going to discuss how.
All right.
How much and when, by the way. I don't know if you know that, but there's actually how much the temperature has to be and what time.
Okay. So my guess would be you have to turn on the heat like November 10th.
It's good try. Okay. New York City heat law requires that landlords provide heat to their tenants during the heating season. The heat turn-on date in New York City runs from October 1st to May 31st.
Good.
Now I'm just like, Google this. You can Google this.
Right.
The law defines heat as a temperature of at least 68 degrees Fahrenheit in all living spaces during daytime hours and 55 degrees Fahrenheit at night.
That is cold.
Okay. You see that?
That is really cold. I'm a 72 gal.
You see, but I'm just bringing that to your attention. So now let me get a little bit more detail.
Mm-hmm.
And then this is going to be related to COVID and the Spanish flu. Could we?
Okay.
I'm giving you like a teaser. Okay.
Okay.
So between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Okay, I'm giving you more details. 6 a.m. So during daytime, heat must register at least 68 degrees when the outside temperature falls below 55 degrees.
Okay.
So
yeah.
So meaning when it's cold outside, it needs to be at least 68
Mm-hmm.
inside. But if it's above 55 outside, it doesn't have to be.
So what do you go in and turn it on and off all the time, or you have someone do that?
That's one of the problems. Let's discuss. That's a great question. So we'll come
Okay.
back to that.
Because I
we'll
know
come
these
back
are
to
old buildings. I don't think they have nests and stuff.
I know. Well, it's going to be related to the
Right,
thing that I
right.
said before. So give me a second. So let me finish this thing. So now we talked about between 6 a.m. and 10 p.m. Between 10 p.m. and 6 a.m., heat must register at least 62 degrees Fahrenheit. Hot water must register at or above a constant temperature of 120 degrees to the tap. Okay. So now you're like, wait a second. Let's just look at the 68. Some people are cold at 68.
Mm-hmm.
You
I
said
am.
you just told me 72. My wife is cold at 68.
I'm cold at 68.
So
for
now I
sure.
get a call from a tenant that says I'm cold. I'm like, but I have a temperature sensor in your apartment and it's 70 and it's supposed to be 68, but it doesn't change the fact that you are cold. You think you're cold, right? So that's one of my pet peeves is that, I can't. So then what do? Well, in my bedroom we put an extra heater, but it's annoying that you have sort of one system to control everything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then unless you have individual units in rooms, which we have in some cases, but for the most part in these older buildings they have central heating systems. Now, one of the things that, and it's actually in the office that I'm in now, is that it's either boiling hot and you have to open the windows in the winter,
Mm-hmm.
and you're like, that's so inefficient, and you get to these buildings and they have these huge radiators, right? You see one right behind me is a huge radiator.
Yep.
Okay. You're like, that's big. Why is it so big? Why do you think it's big? I'm going to say that. Like, how about this? Just
Because-
like a little thought experiment.
I mean, I don't know the square footage, but it's probably a big room you're in.
Not that big,
So it's heating up the whole room.
but it's not that big.
Then I don't know.
Okay. So remember when COVID came around and
I
they said,
do.
oh, we're safer outside.
Okay.
So if you have like outside air, it's better.
Mm-hmm.
So now I'm going to say to you, in the Spanish flu, the same rules were applied. They said, oh, remember you had pictures of old classrooms being outside, people being outside because it was safer. So that when they built these old buildings after the Spanish flu, they wanted people to be able to open the windows in the winter. So they had to put enough heating in the buildings so that people could open the windows in the winter and ventilate with the outside air. So like that's overheating. So today you're like, oh, we don't do that, but the heat's on one blast and you're like, I have to open the window and I don't want to, but those days that's what the purpose was.
That is a good
So the buildings haven't
explanation.
been changed since then.
Mm-hmm.
So like, and you realize you go, that's so inefficient, but that was the purpose of that back then, and we have a little bit of a legacy from that. Isn't that interesting?
It's very interesting. I never knew that, why all the radiators were that big.
Or why was it got so hot? Like when you're in these buildings, like either hot or cold, and I have to open the window. That's why.
Wow.
Yeah. So now, hopefully, people who listen to the podcast are informed about what their heat is supposed to be by law and when, right? Because I'm looking at the laws there. And landlords also, it's like, oh, you're supposed to provide this. And then, but what happens frustratingly for me is people call up and say, oh, I'm too cold. And yet it's 70 in their apartment. And it's supposed to be 68. Right?
Right.
So what do I do about that? Right? So I want to first, when I get a call like that, I then have to go check that individual apartment and make sure, hey, is the heat on at all first?
Mm-hmm.
And then maybe there's an open window,
That's true.
and maybe the person is, I have to see if they're wearing clothes and things like that. But certain people, like that's, you go through the checklist of, making sure that is the heat on. Maybe there's not enough heat. Maybe this person needs some more heat. Is there a way to augment that? But that's a little frustration that we have as landlords and as tenants, the dealing with these old central systems that don't work on demand, and then also knowing the laws about what's required and when, those are cool.
I never knew that.
Yeah.
That
And
there
now,
was a
so
number.
then what happens is also a frustration for me is, and a good thing and a bad thing, right? So what I would prefer is if a resident calls me or my team up and makes a report about this and says, look, I have no heat, or I'm cold, which is fine, and then we'll deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
As opposed to calling like a city agency directly. And then we get from a call from the city agency. Like I appreciate that's an escalation, but some people go directly to do that. And I'd like to have the opportunity to deal with it
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So that's a frustration.
So a good step though as a tenant would be to get maybe a little thermometer in your apartment, because I know mine didn't come with it, and just put that in there, and so you can and you know what your temperature is.
That's a great
That's a good
point.
idea.
And let me say it depends on where you put the thermometer.
Oh,
right?
Yeah, I guess. Well, yeah, you can't put it on the radiator. You put it where.
See,
Right.
you see what I'm saying?
Well, yeah. I have
I'll tell
some
you,
common sense.
No, I'll tell you. It's fine. Like I got a call from a tenant once, and they said it's cold, and I'm like, and I happen to have a heating sensor in their apartment that I could look up now these days, right? So I type in the thing, and I look at the dashboard, and I see, it's 72 in their apartment, and I said to the guy, dude, it's 72 in your apartment.
Lucky.
He goes, so I said, so what's cold? He goes, the radiator's cold. I go, but it's 72 in your apartment. He goes, I go, so are you cold? He goes, no. He goes, it's cold, like meaning the radiator. And I'm like, that's what I'm after. I want it to be 72 and the radiator not being on.
Oh my gosh. So you must deal with all sorts of.
Yeah. So it's
yeah.
It's very interesting what that is. So anyway, I hope that helped, like knowing the heating rules in your neighborhood, area, municipality. You can Google them, and then you could actually have some thermometer in your apartment and check that out and say, hey, it's supposed to be this, it's supposed to be that. If it's not that, you should call your landlord and say, here's what's happening. And sometimes the windows are drafty and they need to be insulated, or sometimes the heating element's not working and that needs to be fixed. A lot of people don't know how the heat system works also. Like, do you ever see I'm sure you've seen baseboard heating?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So baseboard heating, the cold air goes down and then circulates around the baseboard pipes, so that if you have furniture that's all the way up against the pipes, the air is not going to circulate around that. So that's an issue.
We had these little plastic things you put under the couch. It was for the air and the heat, and it goes under.
Yeah,
so that's a good thing.
Yeah, so that's it. That's an important fix. So sometimes you get into, you're like, I'm not going to have heat. Well, because you're covering the whole heating element.
I know.
So those are things that we can fix. And
what about
draft and things like that?
In my apartment, and a lot of them, they have like these like pipes. So there was a radiator, but then there's also this pole like in the bath. Is that just another version of a radiator?
Yeah. What happens is that's a supply pipe. I'm looking at one here. That was like banging.
New York.
Sometimes
New
you
York
get banging in the pipes where there's like cold air hitting hot water, and it causes the pipes to bang. You didn't hear that, but sometimes during this podcast I get a banging. So that's those are pipes that supply heating probably to other apartments above you or below you, and those can be a source of heat as well.
Those get really hot.
They get really hot, so you should watch out around those. But sometimes that's a source of heat as well. So,
all right. That was really, really good to know. I think we learned a lot from one of your pet peeves. I'm definitely interested to hear more in future episodes. So I learned all about heating. Thank you so much, Albert.
You're welcome. Thank you.